A lot of people are actually playing tracking wrong. Yeah, you heard me, wrong. I want you to play this scenario alongside me. You go to flick to an enemy, land on his head just to blow your load all over him and not hit a thing.
I'm about to go.
That is starting to sound way too relatable. So how do we fix this? In a new series that I'm starting, we're exploring different types of aim and which ones to attack if you're struggling with certain issues. So for example, how do we attack a scenario when someone is both moving predictably and does sharp movements? This is actually why we start off with strafing. Probably the most important part of tracking. You wouldn't be wrong to mistake it with basically the entire thing, but there's actually a lot more to it. There's two types of strafes you need to be focusing on. First one is tracking that sub button and clicking on it. The other less important one is called long strafes. This basically implies the bot moving in a smooth motion and sometimes does switches in directions. This is great for people who struggle smoothly tracking a target that's moving in a predictable manner, and also great for those people who struggle with the basics of reactivity, as it blends in smoothness and reactive into easier versions. I do recommend faster versions for intermediate players though, and aiming roughly for 25 to 40% accuracy on scenarios such as centering, swave track, and smooth bot. Now what about another issue? What about when you go to track a guy that is moving predictably just for him to randomly switch up the directions on you, causing you to whiff all your shots? That, my friends, is why we attack fast strafes. This is basically like the harder version of long strafes where the bot switches directions much more frequently. This is typically thought as reactive in the community. Nonetheless, it's great for those people who lack overall mouse control and struggle with those 80-80 movements commonly seen in games like Apex or Overwatch. But be sure not to neglect this one for games like Valorant due to that mouse control building characteristic fast strafes actually give you. This field is actually quite unique because it offers that speed to adjust in tracking. Now I also want to talk about a weakness in fast strafes that actually cause certain people to build up shaky aim. For most people, this isn't an issue, but if you're struggling with this, I would recommend checking out Regen Tracking at this timestamp, or actually playing one reactive scenario and then one smoothness scenario directly after to smooth out your hand. And the last thing is that a lot of skilled aimers actually attack fast strafes with easier versions to really build up the good habits of reacting correctly. Aiming for 40 to 60% accuracy on scenarios like close fast strafes, mid-range fast strafes, or VSS GP9 is recommended here. What do we do if we struggles on all aspects of aim, but we actually already have good mouse control? Well, that's easy. Smooth reactive is a field I'd strongly recommend getting into, especially if you're around that intermediate area and you don't really know what to play. Here the scenario designer mixes up precision, reactive, and smoothness all into one style. And it's great for people who might already have good mouse control and flicking but lack that ability to track. You wouldn't be wrong to confuse this with basically all tracking, and that's part of the reason why it's so powerful. So which scenarios are we looking for? Fogla XYC, Air Nuns, All-in-One, and Packy Aim are some of the standouts in this field. What if you're reacting really well but lack that ability to keep your crosshair on the target? Regen Tracking is one of the most unique style of scenarios we're going to be talking about, because these scenarios are all built to punish you for making mistakes. Take your crosshair off the target and the bot regenerates all its health, making your progress with that bot useless and you have to start all over again. Annoying, but it's actually quite effective at making your aim almost glued to your target. However, not playing it correctly can actually damage your aim. The issue with these style of scenarios is that they make you overly smooth, causing you to almost lose that reactive elements in game. So be sure to pair these up with some fast strafes or even some smooth reactive. These scenarios are really good for people who struggle consistently tracking a target. Now, what if you're under tracking? You're trailing behind the target all the time, and whatever you seem to do, you can't for the love of you just move your crosshair an inch further onto the target. Precision tracking. Just as the name sounds, you're basically supposed to focus on the precise part of tracking. This will cause you to actively micro adjust, and why it's so powerful for games like Valorant or even games like Overwatch. So what do we want to focus on here? we want to focus on moving as smoothly as possible doing these. Of course, making sure not to sacrifice our reactive ability. These are some smaller shaped bots like yours that move similar to how a long strafe scenarios would, except they're anorexic. This is great for people who under-track or generally want to hit more headshots in games like Valorant. Scenarios like smooth strafes, pass through track extra small, smooth your wrist extra thin stand out amongst hundreds of scenarios out there. So that's it. Now you have all the info you need to glue that crosshair to your enemies. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and a sub.